Another episode of Courtside with the Cavs begins here with German and Spencer Davies. I'm just at home in Cleveland, but as you can see, based off the incredible, impeccable background that is posted up behind Spencer Davies, he is at IMG Academy where the Cavaliers are holding their training camp practices this week. And looking forward to getting an update on what's kind of been going on down there in Florida. But I guess the most important question has been, are you enjoying yourself in Florida and indulging in the nice weather? Not that it's not nice here in Cleveland right now, too, but.
Yes, I am. No, yes, I am. And I know that I look like a ghost on this camera right now, but that's because of the lighting in this gym. I'm not tan by any means, but I did go and explore Anna Maria Beach. It's a beautiful, beautiful place.
I saw your picture.
Right outside of Sarasota. Went downtown to Sarasota, hopefully getting down to Siesta Key later today because it was a pretty easy day here for the Cavs and didn't even really have any availability because they were working outside on the track on agility and they were at the baseball field having some fun. So much, much more laid back than day 2 of training camp, which was a rigorous practice. Scrimmage ended it, and Kenny Atkinson said he was pretty pleased actually with how sharp everybody was and that there wasn't any mental mistakes or turnovers or anything like that. So good to know that. Day 1, really, it was just kind of them getting here, getting acclimated, not too much going on in day 1, just pretty light, to be honest. So they were just really just kind of getting acclimated to that stuff. And it was because Kenny Atkinson said the pre-stuff that went up into camp, all of those mini camps led by Evan Mobley, Donovan Mitchell, the guys being together, he knows that they're ramping up already. So, day 2 was definitely the most rigorous day here, but for them, I think that it was just a little bit more laid back today, and they were having some fun outside in the beautiful weather.
Well, first of all, let me just say, because Grant Delpit, Cleveland Browns safety, the Browns are over in London right now, and he actually dropped a nugget today. He was asked to kind of describe Cleveland to locals in London that don't know Cleveland, and he basically said, if you ever seen the movie Trainwreck, it was the scene where LeBron James is sitting there at the table, and he says, "You never come visit me in Cleveland. What's the difference between Cleveland and Miami?" He basically said that Cleveland and Miami are the same. So, Spence, you're getting to experience a little bit of that Florida weather, what it's like. And you can certainly speak to whether or not Cleveland's like Miami or not. But I'm glad at least someone's getting to experience some of that.
Yeah, you know what? It's really nice down here. I'm not gonna lie. I love palm trees. So I see palm trees. I smell the salty air. It's just warm and just kind of when you're by the ocean, it's just different. It's a cool feeling being by the Gulf.
You mean you can't smell the salty air on the shores of Lake Erie when you go?
You can't
go to Edgewater.
You can't. I love my hometown. But I cannot smell that salty air up there. And also when I'm walking down a beach that is just crystal clear water, and you have this beautiful powdery sand, I just think to myself, why do I live where I live? but in all seriousness, though, I do miss home. All the stuff that's going on with the Guardians and Tigers. Cannot wait to watch Game 3 with the Guards and Tigers today. But just getting this done, getting some updates to you, and we can just get rolling now.
Yeah. Let's get rolling a little bit because I'm curious to see. First of all, I think it's interesting you mentioned they didn't really do a normal practice on Thursday, and they sort of opted for some fun stuff. And what I think is interesting about that is, we know they've done this before. We've seen them do this type of stuff. There was the trip last year that they went on where they stopped at Vanderbilt and were doing some stuff on the football field, playing some football where obviously Darius Garland went to school. And people can't forget how important that type of stuff is. And that kind of is like what training camp's all about. I think we heard at Media Day, Evan talk about how he hosted his teammates on some sort of pre-training camp training sessions. And from what you said, it sounds like Kenny thinks there was a lot of valuable stuff that was done on the court in those. And so I think it is valuable and important that Kenny, while on this trip, while down there sort of getting ready for the season, is prioritizing some of that team building stuff, because that is, the on the court stuff matters, but these guys know how to play basketball and they're going into year 2 in this system and what Kenny likes to do. But it's that chemistry, especially with new faces here, right? I mean, there's a number of guys that are new. Lonzo Ball, chief among them. Like I think getting acclimated and getting to know guys is one of the hardest things that has to happen for a team to become a championship contending team. And so I think it's cool that they sort of did take a day to prioritize that, even though it threw off your schedule for the day.
It did a little bit, but that's okay. Figure it out again. I am in beautiful Sarasota, Florida, so I'm okay with it. I am okay with it. But you mentioned Lonzo Ball being a new face. There's Larry Nance Jr. coming back into the fold after a number of years. You have Thomas Bryant coming off of a near championship winning run with the Indiana Pacers. And let's not forget, too, Tyrese Proctor's a part of this, and he's a new face. He's a rookie.
Yeah.
So they do have some guys that are in here. And Kenny Atkinson gave a ton of credit to the front office for adding those pieces and just helping push this team towards a little bit more of a faster game, a little bit more of a balanced game. And I think that those guys are really going to help in their own ways. Obviously, the three vets, now that Lonzo's a vet, I'm getting old. So the three vets are going to help, push their respective position groups. And Tyrese Proctor is going to be pushing the other guys for playing time and trying to do that. Even though Kenny said that Tyrese has to, work on the physical part of it a little bit more. He said that a vet told him yesterday that, he looks like he belongs. So there's a bunch of stuff that can happen early on in training camp to leave a first impression and to leave that mark that can help out Tyrese in this situation, but also the other veterans to help push.
Yeah, listen, this is where it all sort of begins for this team. They got off to such a hot start last year. I don't think anyone should be anticipating that they replicate a 15-game win streak to start the year off. But these are where that chemistry is built. This is where you start to figure out roles for certain players. And we know they're going to be working hard up until the preseason really begins, down there, trying to make sure that they get themselves kind of acclimated and in sync and doing all the right things. I think what was interesting in terms of roles, Spin, that we heard from on Media Day, I'll just start with the big one, which was DeAndre Hunter just straight up told us, I'm going to be in the starting lineup. And he was asked if that mattered to him. He said it doesn't matter to me, but that's kind of been communicated to him already by Kenny Atkinson that will be his role. I thought it was interesting that he just kind of offered it up because we had spent months, kind of speculating will he be, won't he be? It'd be interesting to see if he would be, depending on what, if Max Strus was available and what that would kind of look like, but we know it's going to be a while for him. But I do think, as we've gotten into before, that is such a unique, it's kind of like you're adding another player into the mix here in a way, because obviously DeAndre Hunter was here last year and he came over at the trade deadline, but because he had a role as a backup off the bench, he wasn't in the starting lineup very often. So it almost is like another new addition that comes to this team that you can sort of activate him in a different way and see what he brings to the table as a member of the starting lineup. So I'm certainly intrigued to see what that looks like with DeAndre Hunter. And I think the possibilities around this, because he's the perfect prototypical wing player that you'll look for in this league that so many teams covet.
Where do you like the ball? Where do you want the ball? We kind of talked about how Kenny Atkinson was asking him those things when they were building their relationship. DeAndre even went into how their off-court kind of bond has just grown over the summer, which is extremely important. And from an on-court perspective, it sounds like, and I know that you said that DeAndre is, looking to start stuff like that. They're still not officially making anything like that. But the way that he went about his business on day one of training camp was talking about him getting the first crack at it, right? He's going to get the first crack at it because DeAndre fits well with Evan Mobley. He fits well with Jared Allen and all that sort of stuff. But then he also mentioned that he fits well with Don and Sam Merrill. So maybe that's a clue. Maybe that's a hint at what the starting lineup's going to be. Maybe it's going to be Don, Sam, DeAndre, Evan, and Jarrett. And that could be pretty big. That could be pretty big for him. And I think it works on both ends. You look at the switchability. Jared Allen, they've been talking about using him more and getting him more acclimated to being out on an island by himself against 5 out. And offensively, Dean Wade was talking about how Jared Allen is doing better job at sprinting to the corners and hitting guys hard with screens, and doing it on the wings too. So they're trying to get Jarrett to understand that he needs to be comfortable in 5 out situations too. So, a lot of us including myself, like, where does Jarrett fit in all this mix? I think that was a really interesting takeaway as well, because it was really challenging for him on the offensive end because he got relegated to being the screen guy, being the rebound guy, and that's my main role. I think they're going to try to involve him a little bit more this year to keep him engaged. And also, Evan's gonna be starting to draw those double teams and such. So the ball's gonna be popping around, and someone's gonna end up being open. And Jarrett's a really good passer in the pick and rolls. He's really good job at setting screens and protecting the rim. So I think he's capable of it.
Yeah, you mentioned Evan there, by the way, and I think one of the big things that stood out about his press conference at Media Day was just the fact that he was very open about the idea that he's going to handle the ball even more. And that was already a priority spin for Kenny Atkinson last year. When I remember standing in that press conference room when he was announced as the head coach, and he spoke so glowingly about Evan and how important he was to the future of this team and what they were trying to do and accomplish and all those different things, and how he was already planning on getting the ball in Evan's hands more. And I think we saw that they certainly made that a thing. Like they tried to get Evan more involved in the offensive end that way. But to see that now the expectation is we're taking that up another notch. Like Evan's already embracing, hey, I'm going to be doing that even more. I think that's another huge proponent to what this offense is going to look like this year and how it's going to look different this year. And it's another key part of how this all kind of comes together. And it's also just part of Evan's evolution, right? Because
most definitely
him holding these team sessions over the summer with the group, him embracing an increased role in the offense and handling the ball, him speaking out a little bit more and being so adamant that he's going to be an MVP candidate. I think all those things matter as we try to decide, like, is there another gear to Evan's game? And is that the thing that's going to take this team to the ultimate goal, which is, hey, we want to chase an NBA Finals. So we know how prominent Evan's going to be, but his admittance at Media Day that, hey, I'm going to be handling the ball even more, I think was a huge, huge sign of like what's to come for him for sure.
Another huge thing that stood out to me, and this might be my last point because I actually got to run. There might be something going on here, but I will tell you this. It is amazing to me how Kenny Atkinson was talking about Evan Mobley and, him gaining the weight, but also that he's going to be a perimeter guy and he's going to be someone that not only does the perimeter, but stays in the middle of the floor because of how versatile he's like, I love perimeter Evan, but I also love big Evan. So keep that in mind. But sorry that go ahead.
Real quick. I was just going to say, can I ask you what you thought about Darius Garland at his press conference at Media Day, basically saying, like, I'm the leader of this team? Because I thought that was interesting. And I know, like, all these guys believe they're a leader to a degree, and it's not like it's a bad thing he said it. But I think when people look at this team, they point and say, Donovan Mitchell's the guy. And he, maybe even to a degree, like, Evan needs to be that guy. But Darius took it upon himself to basically say, like, listen, I'm leading this group. I know what my role is here. And I thought that was interesting that he's sort of taking on that role and embracing that role.
He is. And I think the leadership portion of this is huge. By the way, he did 45 minutes on the first day of practice, no contact, but Kenny said don't read into too much into that. I think that goes back to obviously him, doing more eventually down the line, but they're going to take it easy on him, kind of how we were talking about that earlier. But no, he's taking that seriously. He's taking that upon himself to do that. But I think he's going to do a good job at that, and eventually when he gets back, that he'll be ready to take on that mantle.
Spin, I know you had to jump off. I'll real quick stay on for a few more minutes just to give people kind of a recap of what I took away from Media Day, especially because, as you know, Spence, I completely screwed up our video. It was one of the best videos we've ever done. We were like in and out in like 6 minutes, and there was no sound. I was so mad at myself.
It was a great picture, folks.
I'm good. So I'm going to use this space to sort of recap a little bit. But Spin, obviously,
do that.
Grateful that you're down there. We'll have more to talk about when you get home. So
yes, sir.
Yeah, keep doing your thing down there, and I'll hold down the fort here for a few more minutes.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, gotcha, man. So as Spence jumps off here, I think it is worth sort of looking back on Media Day a little bit because we didn't get a chance to actually share the video that we have where we talked about a number of things. But I think a couple of things that stood out to me, other than what we just got a chance to talk about there with Spencer, was the fact that Lonzo Ball he isn't saying he has to be in any certain role. He's just kind of ready for whatever the team's going to throw his way, ready for whatever Kenny Atkinson wants him to do. But he talked a lot about just like making sure he's setting up his teammates, being a good teammate, making sure that, he's kind of that facilitator role, but taking shots when he needs to. I actually do, and I think Spence and I have to talk about this a little bit more. But I do kind of wonder if especially if Darius is going to miss some time, and we don't know that yet. He was very non-committal on declaring anything in terms of his availability for the start of the season. Now, he did say that he is doing on-court stuff, which is a good sign, because initially the diagnosis was like 10 to 15 games that he might miss. Now it's starting to feel like it maybe because of his not declaring anything, it's starting to feel like maybe he will be available potentially to start the year. And if that's the case, then I think that kind of changes the math on things a little bit. But are you back? I think that changes the math on things a little bit. But I do believe that like Lonzo's role maybe is best suited as a guy coming off the bench initially, as sort of that first man up, that sixth man off the bench, or at least leading that second unit, just because I think there's a great opportunity to get Sam Merrill involved in that starting unit in certain spots, filling in for Darius and letting Donovan handle the ball. Even though you don't want to overextend Donovan, obviously, and give him too big of a workload to start things out, I do think there's something to be said for like getting Sam confidence, especially early in the season. So I'm curious to see how they handle that. But Lonzo's just kind of embracing whatever role he has. He had the great line about he didn't know Cleveland had water, which was kind of funny. Probably one of the lines of the day at media day earlier in the week. And I also did think, guys like Thomas Bryant coming in and him sort of reflecting a little bit on his journey to this point and being sort of a breath of fresh air. Larry Nance, I thought he had another great line from the day where he talked about how he kind of is responsible for this Cavs rebuild because he was, first of all, he was here to help like Darius's development and whatnot. And then also he was one of the key pieces in the Lowry Markkanen trade, which then Lowry Markkanen turned into Donovan Mitchell. So he kind of took credit for that, which was funny. A lot of good stuff on media day that I felt bad we botched our video and didn't get a chance to actually talk about with you, because we had a great sort of commentary on everything that took place on Monday. But yeah, it was a good day all around. I think it's a good start to this Cavaliers season where the vibes are high. And I do think as well that the idea that one of the other things that stood out, and this is maybe a good place to sort of leave us off. One of the other things that stood out was just how these guys talked about moving on from last year and the disappointment of losing the second round of playoffs again to the Pacers and how they're sort of combating that. I heard some things, I'll shout out our colleague who covers the team quite a bit, Mike Lucas from the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. He mentioned that when they talked to Kenny, he alluded to some new sort of program that they're using that's all about like cognitive behaviors and how it basically is like at practice we're doing constant motion. There's no like static shooting. You're just, other than free throws when you're practicing free throws and just shooting the basketball. It's trying to sort of train your mind to understand like, hey, here's what in game you're going to be experiencing. So how quick can you make that decision? How quick can you pivot and do that thing or make the right pass or make the next pass or take this shot, and just kind of like training yourself that way. I think that was kind of interesting to hear. It was also interesting to hear Jalen Tyson mention that after losing to the Pacers, they're upping their conditioning, and that's been a really big focal point for Kenny Atkinson at this point, that they're trying to make sure that they're more equipped to run with teams like the Pacers if they were to meet again in the playoffs, or teams that try to play rather with a faster pace. And that I think is one of the most glaring things that came out of that series, was that the Cavs just didn't seem ready for it. And then there was Donovan Mitchell, who tried to tiptoe around the idea that this Cavaliers team just maybe wasn't mentally prepared for that series. And I thought that was interesting. I thought that was telling, frankly, that he felt that way as one of the leaders and clearly the biggest star on this team, that he felt that way. I'm sure it led to some pretty candid conversations with him and his teammates about making sure it doesn't happen again, but how they kind of mentally cleared their heads and made it so that they can avoid that same thing from happening again, avoid the mistakes of the past, and get past teams in the postseason and actually be ready. And I think multiple guys talked about just having the calluses from last year, and how you got to go through something like that to be able to get past it. And I think that's very fair. Like I do think that's very true, especially for certain players on this team that weren't here for the earlier iterations. A guy like DeAndre Hunter who talked about it. But I also know from a fan standpoint, it probably is a little frustrating to hear that because they've had 2 previous years of early playoff exits that we thought was going to sort of set the tone and change the way that this team prepared mentally for the postseason and making a postseason run. And that's still the thing that even Kobe Altman alludes to being a hurdle for them or something that they have to get better at and get past. Because at his end of the season press conference, he said, like, we've now mastered the regular season. Now we got to master the 16 win season you need to sort of accomplish to win a championship in the postseason. And it's still the biggest hurdle for them. But to hear Donovan Mitchell kind of beat around the bush a little bit or try not to be too critical and choose his words wisely when it came to talking about why that series didn't go well, how they're trying to sort of move past it, and him use the word mental, that they weren't mentally prepared, I thought was interesting. So that's, I think, another big challenge that Kenny Atkinson has on his hands, setting that tone early. It's why I think stuff like the team building and team bonding exercises this time of year, training camp, is important. But yes, this ultimately will come down to like what they do on the court. And it's hard to erase the image out of our heads of this team just looking shell-shocked against a Pacers team that blitzed them. And obviously the Pacers are in a different situation this year. We know the Cavs are one of the favorites to win the East and the NBA Finals. Their biggest challenger, probably the Knicks in the Eastern Conference. But there's certainly things that they need to improve upon, and they recognize that. I'm curious to see how they've maybe changed some things up, and that's why I thought it was interesting to share those 2 sort of nuggets with you. The Jalen Tyson talking about conditioning, what Mike Lucas told me about some of the training that they're changing up and things that they're doing this year. I think those things matter in the grander picture of what this team is trying to do to accomplish that ultimate goal and actually chase a championship, which is obviously what the expectation is for them at this point. And they have a golden opportunity to do it because of the way that the Eastern Conference is set up this year and just some of the unfortunate injuries that have taken place, obviously, as well. So we'll see. But it all starts down there in Florida where Spence is with the training camp and then the preseason obviously looming on the other side. And the Cavs basketball will be here before we know it because their first preseason game is coming up on Tuesday. They're at home against the Bulls. Then they go to Chicago. Then they got the Celtics on the road. Then they got the Pistons at home to round it out on October 14th. And then after that, you're basically 8 days out from the start of the season against the New York Knicks on October 22nd. So very, very hectic time of year. The schedule's coming. The Cavs basketball is coming. And we'll be talking more about it as we always do here with between Spence and I on the next episode of Courtside with the Cavs. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to the channel on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, you can head on over to roundtable.io/NBA/Cavaliers or /sports/NBA/Cavaliers. I've been told they're going to shorten that at some point to check out any of our written content on the team and especially some of our thoughts from things that were said at Media Day. But again, thank you for following along with all things Cleveland Cavaliers with Cleveland Cavaliers Roundtable. And of course, hopefully what's your favorite Cavaliers podcast, Courtside with the Cavs.